There is a version of you right now, today, who is quietly running out of hands. Not out of energy exactly. Not out of willpower. Out of hands. Because everything keeps landing in them. The task nobody else picked up. The problem nobody else solved. The mistake nobody else caught in time. And somewhere along the way, without ever deciding to, you became the person everything gets handed to. And you told yourself this was strength. I want to tell you something today that might be hard to hear at first, but I promise you it gets easier. And I promise you it gets better. The habit of doing everything yourself is not strength. It is one of the most expensive habits a human being can carry, and almost nobody counts the true cost of it, because the bill never arrives all at once. It arrives in small, quiet installments, a little bit at a time, for years, until one day you look up and you can't even remember what you were paying for. My name is Walter Reeves, and for a long time in my own life, I was exactly the person I just described. I was the one who could be counted on. And being counted on felt good at first. It felt like purpose. It felt like proof that I mattered. So I said yes more. I stepped in more. I caught things before they fell. And I told myself that was just who I was. What I didn't understand yet, what took me years and a fair amount of exhaustion to understand, is that being the one who holds everything is not the same thing as being strong. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's the quietest kind of collapse there is, dressed up so well that it looks, from the outside, exactly like competence. If any part of what I just said landed somewhere in your chest, I want you to know you are not alone in this, and you are not broken for feeling it. A lot of the most capable people I have ever known carry this exact weight, and they carry it in silence, because nobody teaches us how to talk about being tired from holding too much. So if this is you, even a little, do me a favor and write it in the comments below. Tell me what you're carrying right now that feels too heavy to put down. I read every single one, and I promise you, when you say it out loud, even just in a comment, something in it loosens. Here is what I have come to believe after watching this pattern play out again and again in my own life and in the lives of people I've had the privilege to know. The people who end up buried are almost never the least capable people in the room. They are almost always the most capable ones, the ones who could do anything. And it is precisely because they could do anything that they ended up doing everything. Not because they lacked ability, because they refused to set any of it down. They did their own work. Then they did the work of the people around them. Then they did the work nobody had even asked them to do, simply because they noticed it before anyone else did. And it felt easier to just take care of it than to wait and see if someone else would. They answered every question. They solved every problem. They fixed every mistake, often before anyone else even realized a mistake had been made. And every time, it reinforced the same quiet belief. I am the one who makes sure things don't fall apart. That belief feels noble. It even feels true most days. But I want you to sit with something I've come to understand about that belief, because it is the single most important idea I want to leave with you today. And everything else I say builds on top of it. The belief that you are the only thing standing between order and collapse is, for almost everyone who carries it, a lie. Not a lie you tell on purpose. A lie you inherited, one small moment at a time, until it hardened into something that felt like fact. And I am going to spend the next few minutes showing you exactly how that lie gets built, what it actually costs you while you're carrying it, and more importantly, what is waiting for you on the other side of setting it down. Because there is another side. I promise you that. And it is better than you think. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through next is the part that changes how you see your entire life. And I don't say that lightly. Let's talk about where this habit actually comes from, because understanding its roots matters more than most people realize. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides, starting today, I will be the person who does everything. It grows slowly, the way a callus grows. One small friction at a time, repeated so often that the thing which used to feel heavy simply stops registering as heavy at all. For some of us, it started with being reliable. Somebody leaned on you early in life, and you didn't let them down, and it felt good. So you became a little more reliable, and then more people leaned, because that is simply what people do. They lean on whatever holds, and you held some more. And at some point, without a clear moment you could point to, holding everything stopped being something you did and became something you simply were. For others, it came from a disappointment. You handed something off once, and it came back done poorly, or not done at all. And you thought, I should have just done this myself. And in that one instance, you may have even been right. But here is the trap. You took a lesson from a single bad afternoon and quietly applied it to every afternoon that followed. You decided the only way anything would get done properly was if you did it. And you built years of your life on top of a conclusion drawn from one moment. And for some of us, and this is the one that's hardest to admit out loud, it had nothing to do with the work itself. It had to do with worth. As long as you were the one everything ran through, you mattered. As long as you were indispensable, you were safe. And letting go of any piece of it felt less like delegating a task and more like losing a piece of your own value. I'm not going to tell you which one of these is yours. That is work only you can do in your own quiet hours, being honest with yourself. But I will tell you this. A habit that grows from a wound cannot be fixed with a better schedule. You can reorganize your calendar all you want. Until you find the actual root, the weeds will keep growing back. Now let's talk about what this habit is actually costing you, because I think the danger of it is that it moves so quietly. Most people never feel the bill arriving until it's enormous. The first thing you lose is not your time, although you certainly lose that too. The first thing you lose is your judgment about what actually deserves your attention. When everything sits on your plate, everything begins to feel equally urgent. The task that could change your next 5 years and the task that means almost nothing sit right next to each other on the same list, wearing the same clothes, demanding the same energy. And because you are the one who has to handle all of it regardless, you slowly stop asking which things deserve you and which things don't. You simply work, head down, hour after hour. And you begin to mistake motion for progress. You begin to mistake exhaustion for accomplishment. Because surely, if you're this tired, you must have done something important. But tired is not the same as important. A person who does everything eventually loses the ability to tell the difference between what is vital and what is merely loud. And that is an expensive thing to lose, because a meaningful life is not built by the person who does the most things. It is built by the person who does the right things consistently with a clear head. And you cannot keep a clear head when your judgment has been buried under the sheer volume of everything you've agreed to carry. I think about this the way I think about a kitchen table covered in mail. When there are 3 envelopes on the table, you know exactly which one matters and which one is junk. When there are 300, they all start to look the same. And the one thing that actually needed your attention gets lost somewhere in the pile. And you don't even know it's missing until the consequence shows up weeks later. Here's something that might surprise you, and I want you to really hear it, because it's the twist that changed how I thought about all of this. Most of what you are carrying right now was never actually asked of you. It was offered by you, quietly, over years, because stepping in felt safer than stepping back. Nobody handed you that weight. You picked most of it up yourself, one small moment at a time, and then you forgot you were the one who picked it up and started believing it had simply always belonged to you. That's the twist worth sitting with for a moment. Because if you picked it up, that also means something important. It means you have the ability to set it back down. And that is exactly where I want to take you next. Because the deeper root of this habit, the one hiding just beneath the surface, is not about time management at all. It's about something far more personal. And once you see it clearly, you will never look at your own exhaustion the same way again. So let's go a layer deeper, because understanding the problem is only half the work. The other half is learning what to actually do about it in real, practical terms you can use starting today. Here is the second cost of carrying everything yourself, and it's a quiet one, because it hides inside something that looks like a virtue. When you do everything, you stop growing in the ways that actually move a life forward. There is a kind of growth that comes only from doing. You learn a skill through practice, and there is no substitute for that. Nobody is arguing against hard work here. But there is a second, rarer kind of growth that only comes from stepping back. from seeing the whole picture instead of just the piece in front of your face, from thinking instead of just doing, from asking not just how do I get this done, but should this be done at all? And if so, by whom and toward what end? That second kind of growth requires space. It requires that some of your hours belong to you and nobody else. And the person who does everything themselves never gets that space because they're always inside the work, never above it. You cannot see the shape of a mountain when your face is pressed against the rock. So here's the first practical thing I want to give you. Something you can do this evening, not someday, tonight. Take a sheet of paper or open a note on your phone and write down everything you are currently carrying, every task, every responsibility, every small invisible thing you do so often and so automatically that you've stopped even noticing you're doing it. Make the list long. Make it honest. And then run every single item through one question and be ruthless about it. Does this genuinely require me, specifically? Or does it simply accept me because I keep offering myself to it? Those are two very different categories, and most of us have stopped telling them apart. Some things truly do require you. Your specific hand, your specific mind, your specific care. Those things are yours, and they deserve everything you have. But there is a much larger category of things that merely accept you. Things you are capable of doing, things you've simply gotten used to doing, but that don't actually need you at all. They would accept anyone's hands, the way a river accepts a stone. And the great mistake most of us make is treating the things that merely accept us as though they required us. We pour ourselves into work that never needed us in the first place, and we run out of ourselves before we ever reach the handful of things that truly did. I want to tell you about a woman I met a few years ago, and I'll call her Diane, because that's close enough to who she was. Diane ran a small family business for almost 15 years, and she ran every part of it herself. The ordering, the scheduling, the customer calls, the bookkeeping, even things as small as restocking the shelves at closing time. She told me once, with something like pride in her voice, that nothing happened in that business without her hands on it. And I remember thinking, at the time, that sounded like dedication. It took me a while, and a longer conversation with her, to understand it was something closer to exhaustion wearing dedication's clothes. One winter, Diane got sick enough that she had to stay away from the business for nearly 6 weeks. Not by choice. Her body made the decision for her. And she told me she spent the first several days of that time certain that everything was falling apart without her. Certain of it. And then something happened that surprised her more than anything else that year. It didn't fall apart. Some things were done differently than she would have done them. A few things, at first, were done worse. But most things got done. And a handful of things, she admitted to me almost reluctantly, were done better. Because the people around her, finally given room to actually contribute, brought ideas she had never let them bring before. She told me the hardest part of those 6 weeks wasn't the letting go. It was realizing, once she was well enough to look back clearly, how much of what she'd been carrying had never actually needed her at all. Years of exhaustion spent on things that would have been just fine in someone else's hands the whole time. That is the shape of the cost we're talking about today. And I want to promise you something before we go further. What I'm about to walk you through in the next part of this conversation is the real turning point. The deeper reason this habit holds on so tightly, even when we can see it clearly. And once you understand it, you will finally have something solid to work with, instead of just a feeling of being tired that you can't quite name. Now we get to the part I think matters most. So I want you to really settle in here, because this is where everything we've talked about so far starts to make sense. There is a third cost to doing everything yourself, and it is the one that surprises people the most, because it doesn't touch you directly. It touches the people around you. When you carry everything, you unintentionally rob the people close to you of the chance to become capable. You think you're helping them. You think you're lightening their load. But what you are actually doing, without ever meaning any harm by it, is telling them in 1,000 small, quiet ways that you don't quite trust them to carry their share. And people have a tendency to become what you treat them as. Treat someone as incapable long enough, step in before they can even stumble, and you will slowly manufacture the very incapability you were afraid of in the first place. I've seen this happen inside families, where one person carries everything and everyone else stays smaller than they actually are, not because they lack the ability, but because they were never given the room to discover it. Real care, real leadership, sometimes means allowing someone to struggle with something you absolutely could have handled yourself, because the struggle is the exact mechanism through which they grow. You do not have the right to quietly steal someone's growth just because carrying their load makes you feel a little more needed. And here, right at this point, is the deepest root of all of this, the one underneath everything else we've discussed. So listen closely, because this is the piece that changes how a person sees their whole life once they finally see it clearly. Most people who cannot let go are not actually doubting the people around them. They are doubting themselves. Somewhere along the way, they tied their sense of worth to their usefulness so tightly that the idea of being still, of not being needed every single moment, feels like a small kind of death. If I am not the one holding it all together, they wonder quietly, then who am I? That question deserves an honest answer, and here it is. You are worth something, whether or not you are useful in this exact moment. Your value was never measured by the volume of tasks you completed in a day. A person who believes their worth comes from doing everything will run themselves into the ground trying to prove something that was never actually in question to begin with. If what I just said is landing somewhere real for you right now, I want to ask you for something small but meaningful. If this conversation has given you even a little bit of clarity today, take 30 seconds and press like on this video. And if you know someone else who carries too much, someone who never learned how to set anything down, share this with them. Not because I need you to, because they might need to hear it exactly as much as you did. Now, let me give you the practical discipline that grows out of everything we've just covered, because insight without action doesn't change a life. And I want this conversation to actually change something for you. The answer to doing everything yourself is not doing nothing. That would just trade one imbalance for another. The answer is learning, with real discipline, to tell the difference between what requires you and what merely accepts you, and then having the courage to act on that difference even when it feels uncomfortable. That discipline is genuinely harder than the discipline of working hard. Working hard is, in a strange way, the easier path for a certain kind of person, because it gives you somewhere to hide. The far harder thing is to stand still and let something you absolutely could have handled be handled by somebody else, and to sit calmly with the discomfort of that without stepping in. You will want to intervene. Every part of you will want to. You'll watch someone move slower than you would have moved, and your whole body will lean toward taking the task back. That pull, that ache to reclaim what you've set down, is exactly the thing you have to learn to resist. Because on the other side of that resistance is the only real freedom available to you. Let me tell you about a stage in this process that catches almost everyone off guard. Because if you don't know it's coming, it can send you right back to your old habits before the new way has a real chance to take root. When you first begin letting go of things you've always carried, life will often feel worse before it feels better. I want you to hear that clearly, and I want you to remember it, because that is not a sign you've made a mistake. That is simply the shape of every real change that has ever mattered. The person you hand something to will not do it as well as you would have, at least not right away. They are learning. You had years to get good at carrying this. It is unreasonable to expect someone else to be excellent at it within a week. They will stumble. They will make small mistakes along the way. Things may get done a little more slowly, a little more clumsily than they got done when you were the one doing them. And in that exact moment, every old fear you've ever carried will come roaring back to the surface. And a voice inside you will say, "See, this is exactly why I always did it myself." You will feel powerfully tempted to snatch it all back and return to the familiar, exhausting way. Because at least the old way worked, even while it was quietly wearing you down. I want to tell you plainly that this is the exact moment where the whole thing is decided, one way or the other. The stumbling you're witnessing is not proof that the change has failed. The stumbling is what growth actually looks like from the outside. It looks like clumsiness before it looks like competence. It looks like mistakes before it looks like mastery. If you take the task back the very first time someone stumbles with it, you will never get past that stumble, and you will quietly teach yourself, once again, that you are the only one who can be trusted with anything important. And you will seal yourself right back into the same pattern for another decade. The discipline, the real discipline, is allowing the thing to be done imperfectly for a while, because being done imperfectly by someone who is still learning is simply the honest price of it eventually being done well by someone other than you. You paid that exact price once yourself, back when you were the one still learning. You've just forgotten, because it happened so long ago that it doesn't feel like it counts anymore. Now let me walk you through what actually waits for you on the other side of this, because we've spent a good amount of time on the cost, and cost is only half of this story. When a person finally learns to stop carrying everything themselves, they don't just lose a burden. They gain something many of them had genuinely forgotten they were even missing. The first thing they gain is themselves, their actual self, the one that exists underneath all the tasks. When your entire identity becomes wrapped around doing, you never actually get the chance to meet the person you would be if you weren't constantly doing. And that person, it turns out, is very often someone worth getting to know. Someone with interests and quiet thoughts and a genuine capacity for stillness they had simply forgotten they possessed. A lot of people who carry everything are, if they're honest with themselves, a little afraid of that quiet room. So they keep themselves relentlessly busy, specifically so they never have to sit in it and wonder who they might find there. But that quiet room is exactly where the most important thinking of a life actually happens. Not the doing, the deciding, the seeing of the whole picture. And you cannot enter that room while your arms are completely full. The second thing they gain is depth. When you stop spreading yourself thin across everything, you finally get to go deep into the small number of things that genuinely matter to you. And depth, more often than most people realize, is where the real, lasting results actually come from. A person who does 100 things shallowly accomplishes far less over a lifetime than a person who commits deeply to 3 or 4 things that truly matter. Because meaningful results reward focus, not motion. And the person who is doing everything is, almost by definition, unable to go deep into anything, because there simply isn't enough of them left to spread that far. I promise you, what comes next in this conversation is the piece that ties everything together. The one insight that, once you truly absorb it, will change the way you look at your own effort for the rest of your life. Stay with me for just a little longer, because this is the part worth waiting for. Here is the strongest insight I have to offer you today, and I want to give it to you plainly, without any dressing around it, because I believe it matters more than anything else we've discussed. The tighter you hold on to everything, the more you actually strangle the very thing you are trying so hard to protect. And the moment you finally open your hand, even a little, it begins to flourish in ways you never expected. That is the great irony sitting at the center of this entire habit. We hold on because we're afraid that letting go will cause everything to fall apart, when in reality, our holding on so tightly is very often the exact thing preventing everything around us from becoming stronger. I want you to notice something, too, about the people who finally learn to release what was never truly theirs to carry alone. They gain a third thing, beyond themselves and beyond depth. They gain the growth of everyone around them. When you stop carrying everyone else's load, the people around you finally get the room to become strong in their own right. When you stop solving every problem before anyone else even sees it, they get the chance to learn how to solve their own. When you step back, even carefully, even a little at a time, the people around you naturally step forward. And the whole system around you, whether that's a family, a team, or simply your own circle of relationships, becomes stronger instead of more dependent on you alone. You find yourself, over time, surrounded not by people who constantly need you, but by people who genuinely choose to stand beside you. And I want to tell you plainly, that second thing is a far richer way to live. Being endlessly needed can feel, for a while, like a kind of importance. But it is often a quiet kind of poverty wearing importance as a disguise. Being surrounded by capable people who choose to walk alongside you, that is real wealth. And you cannot fully have that second kind of wealth while you remain addicted to the first. And there is a fourth gift waiting on the other side of all this, the one that tends to surprise people the most. The work itself, whatever it is you're carrying, actually gets better. Not despite you letting go of pieces of it, but because of it. A group of people, each contributing their own strength, will almost always outperform a single exhausted person trying desperately to be everything at once. For years, you may have believed you were the guarantee of quality. It turns out you may have simply been the bottleneck. Everything had to pass through you, and you were tired, and tired people, no matter how capable, tend to make tired decisions. When you finally loosen your grip, the work is freed from the limits of one single body and one single mind. And very often it becomes faster, steadier, and more resilient than it ever was while you were holding it all alone. So here's what I want to leave you with today. And I mean this with everything I have. Tonight, or sometime very soon, sit down somewhere quiet and be honest with yourself about what you are truly carrying. Not in a vague, general way. Specifically, count the hours you have spent on things that never actually required you. Think about the growth you may have unintentionally slowed in the people closest to you, simply by never giving them the room to carry their fair share. Think about the moments of stillness you have missed because you were too busy proving something that was never in question to begin with. And then, gently, ask yourself whether the badge of doing everything was ever truly worth what it cost you. Because here is what I believe. After all these years, after watching so many capable, good-hearted people run themselves into the ground trying to hold up everything alone, the strongest thing a person can ever do is not carry everything. The strongest thing a person can do is learn, with real clarity, exactly what is truly theirs to carry, and then carry that with everything they have, while trusting the rest to hands that were always capable of holding it, if only they had been given the chance. That takes a different, deeper kind of courage than simply working hard. Working hard, in a strange way, is easy for a determined person. Any sufficiently stubborn person can bury themselves under a mountain of tasks and call it dedication. But to stand back, to release what was never truly yours alone, to resist the pull, to snatch it all back the moment someone else stumbles, and to sit quietly in the room you've finally made space for, that takes a strength of a completely different kind. Not a strength measured by how much you can hold, but by how wisely you choose what to hold and what to finally, deliberately set down. My name is Walter Reeves, and if this conversation gave you even a small piece of clarity today, something you needed to hear and didn't quite know how to put into words yourself, I would be truly grateful if you would subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next conversation. Because there is more of this ahead, more honest, practical wisdom aimed at helping you build a life you can actually stand up straight inside of. Set the weight down, not all at once, and not carelessly, but deliberately, one honest release at a time, with your eyes open and your judgment clear. Keep what is truly yours. Release what was never yours to begin with. Let the people around you grow. Let the work get better without you quietly strangling it. And discover